You're listening to Searching for More, a podcast of the Diocese of Arlington. Hear Jeanne Mancini, president of the March for Life, preview this year's march and talk about the importance of Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, a case currently before the U.S. Supreme Court.
I think with Dobbs and everything, this could be just a banner year for the March for Life. And, last year we had a little bit of a different march with only leaders marching and doing a virtual rally. And I think the enthusiasm is just palpable and people really want to get on a march. We'll see, but I'm very hopeful that this could be a banner year in terms of numbers.
Today's host is Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer for the Diocese of Arlington.
So today we have with us Jeanne Mancini, the president of the March for Life. Jeanne, how are you doing?
Doing well, Billy. Thanks so much for having me.
I have to imagine that in the age of COVID and Omicron and Delta, you have the most unenviable job in the country trying to put together a huge rally in Washington, D.C., one of the most restrictive. How is it going?
It's fun. I think it's God's grace. Definitely an energetic few weeks right now, but I'm happy to be here and so grateful that God's put me in this role. So thank you.
Well, we're excited about it. And for those listening, it's Friday, January 21st. It's the 49th annual March for Life. This year's theme is Equality Begins in the Womb. Jeanne, how did you all come up with that theme, and what are you hoping that it is the message that it sends to people?
So our theme every year is one that we really try to deeply discern and consider, what's happening culturally and what are the most pressing needs in culture. We usually come up with the theme over the summer, before the fall, before it's announced. And so this year particularly, we were so aware that the question of and the debate about equity and equality, whether it's racial, background, whether it's gender, disability, whether it's discriminatory practices, et cetera, that it's something that's been talked about a lot from the halls of Congress to, our dinner tables. This is something that's gotten a lot of attention. And so we wanted to insert into that very interesting and robust conversation the topic of the unborn child and the equality of the unborn child in the womb. And so we chose that theme, but like I said, over the summer, even though it's not debuted until the fall. And then little did we know that the Supreme Court would be taking up this wonderful case, Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health, which is very much about equality in the womb. And so providentially, it's all aligning, and we're really excited to be able to talk about the inherent dignity of the human child in the womb.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up that Supreme Court case. Give for people that aren't real familiar with what it is, just kind of a bird's eye view of what are the issues that the Supreme Court are looking at.
Absolutely. So Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health, essentially, this is a little weird the way that it offers the question, but the Supreme Court is taking up the specific question of, can states enact pro-life laws prior to the time of viability? And why are they answering that question specifically? Because major Supreme Court cases in the past have said no, that we can't have pro-life laws prior to viability. And really the way that both Roe v. Wade and then Planned Parenthood v. Casey a number of years later lay it out in terms of abortion jurisprudence is that prior to viability, right now, states around our country cannot enact laws that protect life. And so this is hoping to really overturn Roe. I mean, in that sense, because it would take really sort of the standing that Roe has, and it would undo it if the Supreme Court says, yes, states are able to enact pro-life laws prior to the time of viability.
At the time of this recording, they're in the midst of the debate, or not the debate, but they're hearing the oral arguments and so on. So when I'm sure you have access to some legal experts. What is the sense that we are getting about the types of questions the Supreme Court justices are asking? Are we expecting a big win here? Is there going to be maybe it's improved, but probably not going to go as far as we want? Like, what are you getting a sense of?
Oh, Billy, I could talk about this for hours. So first, let me say this. So we could just do a podcast all about this. Let me say this. If you're really keenly interested in this, which we all should be, check out our Capitol Hill 101 the day before the March for Life.
Okay.
Erin Hawley, the wife of Senator Josh Hawley, but also just a robust attorney in her own right, and really the right-hand person to Attorney General Fitch from Mississippi, as she was preparing for the Dobbs case, will be giving an overview of this. And so kind of an inside scoop. And so check out Capitol Hill 101. Check us out at marchforlife.org to hear more about that. And you can watch it online, even if you're not coming in person, but you can come in person as well. But what are people saying? No one can read the tea leaves on where any justice stands on this. The only justice that has gone on the record as wanting to overturn Roe is Justice Clarence Thomas. However, by the oral arguments, it definitely seemed like the majority was ready to revisit the question of Roe. And certainly Chief Justice seemed to ask some questions that would have probably sought middle ground. But the majority of conservatives seemed very interested in possibly just overturning Roe. And what would that do, which I think is an important question? It would not, sadly, make abortion illegal throughout all of the states, but what it would do is return the question of abortion legislation to the states. So states could enact laws. So immediately, states like New York and California would have very pro-abortion laws, probably, through all 3 trimesters paid for by tax dollars. But states like Texas and some of the heartland states would be able to be much more protective of life, which they're not able to do under Roe right now. So it's a very exciting time. Will we need to keep working to build a culture of life, even if Roe is overturned 110%? It doesn't, again, make abortion illegal throughout the country.
Yeah, and it would basically return it to a federalist issue, which most issues are. They're managed mostly at the state level with some basic restrictions at the highest levels, but abortion is kind of treated as a separate case where you don't see other rights managed that way. So yeah, we'll keep praying and hope for good outcome and check out that. What was the 101? What was the
Capitol Hill 101. This is a free event, and this is essentially, it helps marchers understand how to interact in a very impactful way with their elected officials, whether it's at the state or local level or the national level. It's free. You can watch it online at 11 on January 20th, a Thursday, or you can even come in person and participate in person. And we've got a stellar lineup. In addition to Erin Hawley, we've also got Representative Vicky Hartzler from Missouri, and then we have from your own state, Victoria Cobb from the Family Foundation. We'll talk about lobbying, or I should say advocating for pro-life issues at the state level. Yeah. And Felicia Pricenor, who also used to work with the Catholic Conference there, will be moderating the entire panel. She's with the March for Life now. We're very blessed to have her.
That's wonderful. I hope people check that out. Speaking of the March for Life itself, the event and the event surrounding it, you always get great speakers and a lot of heavy hitters to show up and to take the mic. Just at again, I'm sure you got a long list of them, but without offending anybody, are you able to mention a few of the ones for us here that will be speaking?
I would be delighted to share our speaker list with you. One that I am personally most excited about is Father Mike Schmidt. Of course, hopefully all of your listeners are very familiar with that name. So. He is the Catholic priest, right, who much to his own surprise, I understand, became the host of the most popular podcast in the world last year for a number of months. And I think even now it's maybe the most popular in our country. And of course, that's just the Bible in a year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The most important podcast ever. So Father Mike is going to be speaking both at the rally, and he's our keynote speaker at the Rose Dinner. We also have, for those of you in my age range, you may remember the TV show Growing Pains. So Kirk Cameron of Growing Pains fame will be speaking. And then sort of other folks that are just so fantastic. We've got from Mary Shelter, I should say a person who was the great recipient of the wonderful work of Mary Shelter in Fredericksburg, Virginia, is Rachel Shaw, a young woman who just has this phenomenal story of really getting back on her feet with the support of a beautiful Catholic maternity home, Mary Shelter in Fredericksburg. I think possibly another favorite will be Katie Shaw. Katie is a Down syndrome. She's a Down syndrome advocate, and I think her just her presence, a person with Down syndrome will perhaps be the most powerful testimony to equality in the world.
Very moving story there, and
very moving.
People with Down syndrome are so unjustly targeted through abortion, and it's that like that. I think there's a conversion for a lot of people in what they think about abortion when they hear how certain groups are targeted by the abortion industry. People with Down syndrome certainly, but certainly minority communities like disproportionately affected by abortion. I think that's going to be a very powerful story.
I think so too. I'm so excited to hear her and so grateful that she's willing to come and speak to the marchers. Mm-hmm. And the list goes on. I mean, I can keep going if you'd like me to.
No. I think people can go to the March for Life. If you just Google March for Life 2022 speakers, you can see there's a whole host of them. Someone even recommend a student speaker, George Schuberg from Christendom College, so a local guy for us. But a lot of speakers, actually a number of them here from our diocese. I encourage you to check it out. But you mentioned Father Mike Schmitz. I had we talk about unenviable positions. I had to open for him, so to speak, at the men's conference a couple of years ago, and we record the talks for those. And his talk got like 218,000 views, I think, as of now on our YouTube channel.
My goodness.
Yeah, mine didn't get quite that much. I think I had like 40. And that morning there was a big snowstorm or ice storm or. I forget what it was. There was some sort of weather event that morning. And it was hard to get there, and it was not clear that his plane was going to land. And I said, if however many hundreds of guys show up to this expecting Father Schmitz and only get me, they're going to tear the roof off the place, and rightfully so.
I'm sure you would have done a wonderful job, Billy.
Well, that's very kind of you. But no, I think you've got a great lineup there. It's going to be very exciting. When you, I think one of the most iconic images in the pro-life movement since Roe v. Wade is the big photo that we get each year of people marching through the streets of Washington. It's I don't know if it's the biggest event in Washington, but it's certainly up there. It's amazing, and it's always a very young crowd. It's a very joyful and energetic crowd. In terms of the broader impact of what the march has on culture and society, do you get a sense that Americans are becoming more pro-life or maybe even more open to it?
Absolutely. You can look at any number of public opinion polls, but that hearts and minds are changing, there's just no doubt. So if you'll be patient with me, I'll just tick off a few data points, which are things that I like to think about. So the height of sort of abortion in the U.S. would have been like when the most abortions were happening, when the most people self-identified as being pro-choice, et cetera. And that was in like the late 1980s, very, very early 1990s. And since that time, so much has shifted in the direction of life. Certainly the number of people who self-identify as being pro-life, the number of young people who are pro-life, but even the sheer number of abortions has gone so much lower, and it's still horrific. I mean, it's still like over 800,000 every single year. But at that point, it was like 1.6 million. So we've almost halved it.
Wow.
And in the last few years, we've gotten down to the lowest number, ever. But even more stunningly, the number of abortion clinics has gone from like 1,200 in the late 80s, early 90s to now about 700. And the reverse has happened for pregnancy care centers. So pregnancy care centers in the late 80s, early 90s, there were, roughly 500. These days there are over 3,000.
Wow.
And I mean, collectively, these organizations are giving over $250 million in free resources to women and men facing unexpected pregnancies every year. So, it's kind of amazing when you consider that. I mean, but are hearts and minds changing? Absolutely. And again, there's so many ways to splice and dice it. One of the polls that I like a lot, some pro-lifers don't like this, and I think I understand why, but 8 out of 10 Americans for over 12 years now would limit abortion at most to the first 3 months of pregnancy. And of course, that's not our law at all in this country. I mean, it's wide open through all 3 trimesters. And that puts us, up there with only 7 other countries around the world But so even things like that show that we're moving in the direction of life. But another one, and I'm probably getting too data focused here, but the General Social Survey, which is a longitudinal study done by the government, shows that the single demographic, the cohort that has most shifted radically in the direction of life are young people. In, when you measure like the earliest, around the time of Roe to now, young people are the most pro-life generation. So all of these points are exciting.
I think with the youth, part of it, in my mind, I'm just, again, being a communications guy, I have to think it's that information isn't restricted like it was before. You have access to Google anything you want, and you can find these things out, and it's also just as easily shareable. Well, I wouldn't say easily, because there's like censorship in tech, and like when we post on our Facebook page, for instance, if we try to run an ad for a pro-life thing, it's very hard. We have to get crafty with the words to get the ad to go through. And I don't think we don't have that issue with anything else, but like maybe the transgender issue or something like that. So when we're doing like housing initiatives for Catholic charities or food, we don't have these issues. When we run into, all of a sudden, when we run something pro-life, we have that problem. But barring that, people have the ability to share this with their networks, and so I think that's, we're not reliant on major media outlets anymore to get the news out. We certainly want that help, but I think young people have such access, and they're living in these digital spaces, and that's where they're gathering this information. They can see the videos, they can see the statistics and the realities. Like I mentioned, some of the more kind of the targeting of certain communities and people. Yeah, I think they're on to the scam. They really are. And you mentioned the numbers, and something I was thinking about the other day. I mentioned this to a friend. I studied African political systems a little bit in college, and I remember the stat of the Rwandan genocide. They don't know exactly how many people died, but it was between like 800,000 and like 1 million, maybe 1.1. And I think to myself, we have a Rwandan genocide in this country every year, like in terms of size and scope. Can you imagine how people's hair would be on fire in Washington, D.C., where we're going to be marching, if that was happening on a regular basis? Every year, something that massive happened. And I think people catch on to this. And the size and the scope, it's half. It's still a tragedy. Listen, 800,000 is a lot better than 1.6 million. But the scope of that should even shake us and bring us to march and more every year. Yeah.
Yes, lest we sort of, rest on our laurels because we're doing a good job. No, I mean, we should be so overwhelmed by, the magnitude of what's still happening. Yeah. But that's a great comparison, the Rwandan genocide, and that's something I'll think about in the future. That's a good way of looking at it, because I think, the bottom line there too, Billy, is that I think sometimes we hear these numbers and we become kind of like desensitized to it a little bit, and then when you actually put like a picture of what that looks like in New York City, more Black babies are aborted than are brought to term. I mean, when you really sometimes when you think about what that means, it just has such it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, I think it motivates a lot of people to stay in the movement. I don't get a sense that there's a lacking of energy in the pro-life movement, despite that it's been how many years since Roe v. Wade. That is not dissuading people. People are coming to the march. I think COVID will impact the numbers. I'm sure some. I bet you have some insight into that. But I don't think. And again, with young people, there's a new generation being born in pro-life families, right? And they're being exposed to this reality. And how would you not be motivated to participate, at least, here and there? Not everyone dedicates their whole, life to this, as you and your team have. But many, I think, are ready to speak out when they witness this. And that movement only builds as time goes on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you see the numbers impacting this year in terms of attendance at the march? I'm sure it'll be lower. That's true for every event of every type. But what do you kind of get a sense for at this point?
Gosh, it's a great question. So we had to enact some of the COVID protocols for indoor events. So this is not related to the march itself, but for some of our indoor events. And we're still sold out. So I did hear today that a big college in the Midwest, big Catholic college in the Midwest, isn't going to be able to come to the march because of Omicron. So I think people need to do what they feel most comfortable with. Yeah. But I think with Dobbs and everything, this could be just a banner year for the March for Life. And, last year we had a little bit of a different march with only leaders marching and doing a virtual rally. And I think the enthusiasm is just palpable, and people really want to get on a march. We'll see, but I'm very hopeful that this could be a banner year in terms of numbers.
That's wonderful. We had our Diocesan Pilgrimage a little while back, and we were in that same position, actually debating at one point as a leadership team, do we actually hold this? Are people ready? That kind of thing. And it was a packed Basilica Shrine in D.C. We were stunned at how many people showed up, bus after bus after bus. So we were wrong at our apprehension in holding it. So I think I hope the same goes for the March this year. And I'm bearing the lead probably a little bit for Arlington Diocese parishioners. Talk about the group that's leading the March this year.
Christendom College is leading the March. That's right. We're so delighted to have Christendom. Our hope was that they would have marched at the front last year, but with everything that shifted, they weren't able to. So they've been waiting a long time, and we just love Christendom. I mean, they bring a big group every single year, of course, out in beautiful Front Royal. So grateful for their support. Yeah,
and Bishop Burbidge will be there with them, locking arms and leading that march. So Bishop Burbidge, I know, is looking forward to that. So if someone's listening and they're part of a group that did cancel or they can't make it, what would you say is the best way to participate or tune into what's going on?
Well, everything will be live streamed, so you can check us out at marchforlife.org and RSVP to get the live stream information. One of the most important things around the time of the March for Life is to, especially if you're a young person, but at any age, to participate in social media. And we use this hashtag called Why We March. And the reason that we use that is so that people can tell their stories, because the stories are what is typically, most compelling, or what is typically most compelling for people who aren't with us on this issue. So tell your story. I guess that's my bottom line. Tell your story. Use that hashtag. Please be courageous. Tell us why you're pro-life, even if you can't come. Maybe somebody will be really changed by that. And then, as always, with my brother and sister Catholics, if I could really ask for your prayers and your fast for this. We know it's a spiritual battle, and we really know that and experience that in January, and just really appreciate any prayers and fast for the march, but clearly, much more importantly, for the issue that we march for, and for the decision that will be coming in June from the Supreme Court, and for all that's surrounding that.
No, I completely agree. I encourage everyone to please pray for that, and certainly on the day of the march and even outside of that, but use the hashtag #WhyWeMarch to tell your story and to provide a simple witness. And as people that are following you on social media might not even know that you're pro-life because you don't typically post about those issues, but think about the evangelization that happens by simply offering your voice in a kind and loving way to an issue this important. And certainly pray for the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization case before the Supreme Court, that is an outcome that supports justice for the unborn. And again, the theme this year is Equality Begins in the Womb. Jeanne, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You and your team are such selfless servants of God in this critical work. I can only imagine the logistical challenges you have faced through this. It is shaving a lot of time off purgatory, not that you had much to start with, but I just, on behalf of everyone that's listening and just grateful for that, I just want to say thank you for all that you guys are doing.
That is so nice of you, Billy. That really means a lot. I lean so much on my faith. This is a call from God, and he gives me the grace. But if I didn't have, Mass to go to, I went to Mass right before doing this. And if I couldn't go and pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament, there is no way that we could do this work. And all of our staff they're responding to a call from God. So thank you. And boy, are we grateful for the Diocese of Arlington and for our shepherds. I mean, wow. I think even all the more grateful after these few years of COVID. I mean, what leaders. So deeply, profoundly grateful for all that you do.
Oh, thank you so much. Again, so marchforlife.org to check out everything related to the march and the list of speakers and all that great stuff, the Capital 101 project as well. So to check it out all, go to marchforlife.org. Jeanne, again, thank you so much for your time. You've got so much going on, but you were very generous with us. Thank you so much.
Very grateful. Okay, take care and God bless, Billy.
God bless.
You're listening to Searching for More. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a review on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Also, make sure you follow the Diocese and the Arlington Catholic Herald on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And subscribe to our YouTube channels for regular videos that inspire, educate, and inform about the Catholic faith in our diocesan community.